let's pick up the biography again, the linear biography, and go to college.
Yeah.
So you go to school, where and for what?
I go to the University of Chicago. I'm interested in neuroscience more than chemistry at that time, and that was sort of an interesting time also. Around 2006 was when I was a freshman, where there was a kind of this growing obsession with pop neuroscience. But I think that people had they'd sort of decided neuroscience explains human behavior. So if we're going to understand love, and we're going to understand violence, and we're going to understand decision making, forget psychology, that old pseudoscience of psychology. We need neuroscience to explain human behavior. And I was sort of caught up in that idea that, oh yeah, neuroscience, it explains everything. It will tell us why we're conscious. But of course, everyone was dramatically overestimating the explanatory value of neuroscience for psychology.
So what was your major?
Well, initially it was neuroscience. Then I had my whole undergraduate existence was really bizarre, but I had a weird incident where my best friend at UChicago had a psychotic break.
Can I ask you a little bit about your friend's psychotic break?
Sure.
What did that look like?
It's a bit of a long story, but he was a brilliant person. When I went to UChicago has this reputation of being where fun goes to die. That's the thing that people say about it. That's the catch line. And I thought, good, I don't want fun. I want to sit in a Gothic library and read and not party. I want to just be involved in this secluded intellectual life, and I'll have an Adderall prescription, and I'll have great works of literature and science, and that will enrich me. But then I got there, and I was so unhappy, not with the classes, but with the people there. I felt that it wasn't a choice to be a nerd that people were making, that it was the only thing that people could be, and that people were very culturally unaware. And this friend of mine was he'd been in a band, he was culturally aware, he had seen films that weren't The Big Lebowski, and I thought, okay, this guy is really interesting. And he was also very interested in psychedelic drugs, which I was becoming very obsessed with. And he was very much my equal. Now I've been studying this so much that it's a little bit hard for me to think back to a time when my knowledge of the subject was more casual, but we both were obsessed, and we both knew the same amount about psychedelics. And he had ordered a chemical that's a derivative of psilocin, the chemical in psilocybin-containing mushrooms that is metabolized into psilocin when you ingest it. And we were on a break in Times Square, or his friend had an apartment in Chelsea. We both took 22 milligrams of this psilocin derivative, psilocin prodrug, and I felt it within 15 minutes. He didn't feel it at all. He was a little bit bigger than me, and he was sort of frustrated by my enjoyment of the experience because he wasn't feeling it at all. And he said, okay, I'm going to weigh out another 22 milligrams. I'm going to put it in my pocket and keep it with me in case I want to take more later. And so I said, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah. So we leave the apartment, we're walking to Times Square, and he had a congenital heart defect that would sometimes come up in these psychedelic experiences, where it was a source of fear when he would take various drugs. And he was actually much more reckless with drugs than me. I remember this was before ayahuasca was a thing. I had actually not even heard of ayahuasca really myself, and I remember going into his dorm room and he was making ayahuasca in the kitchen, and I said, oh wow, you're making that here? Wow, okay. And he said, yeah, I'm going to take it, and we can go to a party. And I said, okay. And he's like, do you want some ayahuasca? You have visions of having sex with aliens when you drink it. And I thought, well, you should take it first, and then maybe I'll try it later. Yeah. And I remember, we're on the way to the party, and he was vomiting through his nose, walking down the street in Chicago and all this stuff. And so he was very extreme in his use, and he also liked opiates in a way that I was very cautious. Yeah. So that was also a time when you could order dried poppy pods on the internet very easily. So he was making poppy pod tea periodically. And I remember there was a little bit of tension between us where I was uncomfortable with his enjoyment of opiates, but it wasn't a huge source of argument between us. But anyway, so he went into an ATM booth, snorted some of this material, but actually snorted the full 22 milligrams, so had double the dose and had snorted half of it, and came out and said, I felt a shooting pain in my heart right after snorting that. And I said, oh, well, you're probably okay, but be careful. And we kept walking. We went into the basement of a Sparrow in Times Square, and we started. He was saying, I'm gonna drop out of Chicago, or I don't want to go back. It's not a good place. And I was saying, well, you just don't. You're just a hedonist, and you're just the Pauly Shore archetype, and you just want to use opiates all day.
God, it's the last thing you want to hear when you're.
Yes, and he's like, well, you're just a miserable Edgar Allan Poe archetype, and you just want to be an artist who's suffering in pain. And I said, well, yeah, fine, then I am the Edgar Allan Poe archetype, and you are the Pauly Shore archetype. And then it like this argument sort of exploded, and he ran out of the Sparrow and disappeared. And this was before smartphones or anything like that, so I was sort of lost in the psychedelic experience in Times Square by myself, thinking that my best friend at the time may have died, which was difficult for me, but he was going through something much more difficult. He was having a psychotic break, and he'd grabbed a cop and had said, I'm dying, call an ambulance. They'd sent him to Bellevue or wherever. And then from there, it's a long story. I'm still actually friends with him. I talked to him 2 days ago, but he became schizophrenic.
So his life was permanently, radically altered by this experience?
Yes. And I don't blame the psychedelic for this. This is something, when I talk about this, it's a little bit hard because it sounds so obvious that the psychedelic must have caused what happened to him. But that was, the same age that people typically have psychotic breaks.
Yeah.
And there were, even though for the most part he did not have these sorts of indications you typically see in the prodromal period before a psychotic break, he wasn't withdrawn or anything like that. There were tiny indications that had begun to emerge. Yeah, so that's that story.
Wow. How did that experience change you?
It really gave me a very intimate appreciation of the power of psychedelics, and it made me think, okay, maybe every time I use a psychedelic, I'm rolling the dice with my sanity.
Oh. Demons, be gone!
Be gone, demons.
Be gone!
Leave this studio!
Xenon episode. So you went through this experience where you were inhaling xenon gas. So what is xenon gas, and what was that like?
So on the periodic table of elements, you have a column. It is the rightmost column on the table, and it's called the noble gases. And most people will be familiar with helium, which is, of course, used in balloons. It's lighter than air, so it floats. And then you have other noble gases that are lesser known, like argon, krypton, neon, radon, and xenon. And the other noble gases do not have as many uses, partially because they're very unreactive. That's what the name means. They're noble in the sense that they don't react with other compounds. And that was what initially made them chemically interesting. They're also components of our atmosphere. They're in every breath that we take. Anyone that is listening to this is breathing every gas that I just named except for radon, I hope. So they're used in neon lighting and neon signs. They're used in film projector bulbs. They're used in car headlights. They're used in ion thrusters for different types of like satellites and things like that. They have a lot of interesting niche uses, but what makes xenon really interesting pharmacologically is that it's an anesthetic at normobaric pressure. So some of these other gases, if you were to enter a hyperbaric chamber, or if you were to go, 100 feet beneath the surface of the ocean under high pressure, it would begin to induce an anesthetic effect, but that effect would be lost at sea level. Xenon is the exception. Xenon is an anesthetic at normobaric pressure, meaning that if you just fill a balloon with it and inhale that xenon, it will have a very powerful anesthetic effect. It's qualitatively similar to nitrous oxide, for anyone who's tried that, aka laughing gas. Widely used as a pediatric dental anesthetic. And it's a bit stronger than nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is not quite capable of inducing general anesthesia, especially when co-administered with oxygen, which you have to do, whereas xenon is. So it can cause a total loss of consciousness in somebody that is inhaling it. And by the standards of most anesthesiologists that I interviewed, it's basically the perfect anesthetic. Because of its lack of reactivity, it produces no metabolites. It can be recycled. It doesn't produce any known toxic interactions with the body, which nitrous oxide does. And the major drawback is that this is a trace component of our atmosphere. And so in order to collect xenon for medical use, you have to distill millions or billions of liters of air to a liquid, and then you have to do cryogenic fractional distillation of that liquid air in order to isolate this trace xenon component.
Oh,
Demons be gone!
be gone, demons.
Be gone, 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 be gone.
Leave this studio!
Greetings, my beautiful friends. I'm excited. I'm happy. Is that a better way to say it? I'm enthusiastically invigorated by today's guest, Hamilton Morris, a true luminary in the psychedelic universe.
Anytime you get like a kind of a great show meeting something that is not anti psychoactive substances, I think it benefits everybody because it shows, yeah, you can. I mean, there's the opening of the Xenon gas episode. You're inhaling a balloon of a gas that I'd only vaguely heard of and had no idea was psychoactive. Incredible. Do you ever feel like you're putting yourself in danger doing this?
No, and I think that is sort of an interesting question. Is there's often, at least in terms of the consumption of the psychoactive substances, there's often this idea that it's very dangerous. There are very dangerous things that happen in the show, but the consumption of the psychoactive drugs is not one of them, I would say. I think for so long people have associated drug use with self-destruction. Like they consider, even people that enjoy drugs, even people that are in favor of drugs, that think that they should be legal, that think they should be researched, many of those people still on some level believe that the use of a psychoactive drug is self-destructive. And I think that one of the major things that I try to communicate is it doesn't need to be that way. And you can use these things in a way that is not only not destructive, but constructive. It actually will help you. It will make you better than you were. And I think that that's an important lesson. Of course, not all use is like that, and it requires an enormous amount of discipline and research and care in order to achieve the best effect from these experiences. But I think it's just important to keep that in mind, that this is not something that people need to be ashamed of or think is inherently bad for any reason.
I love psychoactive substances. They have been a huge benefit in various parts of my life. But Hamilton, I cannot get the effect of growing up during the war on drugs out of my head. There's always some underlying sense of doing something wrong, of, that this is somehow getting off the track of what a life should be. And these are things that I passionately love. Do you have that in you at all?
Yes.
Or did you have?
Oh, I do. Absolutely.
Oh,
Demons be gone.
be gone, demons.
Be gone.
Leave this studio!
You know, are there things that we can't measure?
There are things that we haven't measured, and there are many, many, many things that we don't know. So I want to be very clear about that. But sometimes people get this impression that science has explained everything, or that there's no mystery in the world. There is enough mystery to last every scientist internationally for as long as humanity will ever be around. There's no shortage of mysteries. But if you are believing in a materialist scientific framework, that is to say, you believe that we live in a reality that is made of matter, that doesn't include spiritual things that are not material in their nature, then it should be testable via the scientific method. So that's the basic idea. So I think that, especially in the realm of psychology, there are all sorts of things that we don't understand. There's a famous psychiatrist named John Mack. He was very interesting in that he was an expert on alien abduction, and his basic attitude toward alien abduction was, it doesn't matter if alien abduction is real or not. What matters is that people think it's real. And if people think it's real, then it's real. And so I have to treat the people who have had these experiences as if it's real, because it is real to them. So it doesn't matter whether, you could spend your whole life saying, no, you weren't abducted, actually. You weren't abducted. Where's your evidence? Show me the evidence. At that point, then you're foolishly neglecting to address the actual issue, which is that this person thinks they were abducted. So I think that there are all sorts of things that are psychologically real, that are perceptually real, that may not be materially real, but that doesn't mean that they're not important.
Have you had psychedelic experiences that have challenged your materialist views? Have you ever been shaken?
No, and again, this is another thing. So when I say that, that's not to say that I haven't had utterly extraordinary experiences. I've had experiences where my entire concept of time disintegrated, where I didn't know who I was, where I thought I was my father or my grandfather, where I was traveling down my genetic lineage back in time, where I didn't know anything about myself. And these are extraordinary experiences psychologically. I just don't feel the need to explain them supernaturally. I can say, the DMT bound to my 5-HT2A receptor, and it caused glutamate release in the prefrontal cortex, and it caused this, disruption of the default mode network, and this or that happened, whatever. You can explain these things pharmacologically. It doesn't capture the psychological essence or the experiential essence of what occurred, but I just don't feel the need to invoke spirits or the astral plane, simply because I don't think they have explanatory value. What is really happening is that I am comfortable saying that I don't know.
Oh,
Demons be gone.
be gone, demons.
Be gone.
Leave this studio!